Hello everyone. For this video, I'm going to be taking you for a drive through Victor and Cripple Creek, Colorado, two mining towns established in the 1890s. And during these drives, I'm going to tell you a historic story that took place in another faraway mining town in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. The story takes place in 1901. Please like and subscribe to stay up to date with the current cases I'm following, as well as to continue to go on drives and listen to old crime stories. And here we go. The beginning of our story takes place in Copper Country on the Keweenaw Peninsula, which is actually an island attached to the mainland by a lift bridge that goes over a canal. Now, the year was 1901. The location was a mining location called Boston, and the mine there was the Franklin Jr. mine. And this case involves one Swedish immigrant and a family of Finnish immigrant. The articles I'm going to read you are out of the Daily Mining Gazette, which is still a paper to this day up in that area, but their reporting techniques and integrity have greatly improved. So, first story, Daily Mining Gazette, Tuesday, November 19th, 1901, on page 5, and the headline read, "Stabbing Affair at Franklin Jr. Lights Put Out During Trouble. 3 men wounded, women and babies present." A serious stabbing affray occurred at Franklin Jr. Mine about midnight Sunday. The participants were a party of foreigners, and their condition at the time, together with their inability to speak English, prevents getting authentic details of the case. As a result, one man lies in St. Joseph Hospital with dangerous wounds. Another wounded man and a suspect are in the county jail, and a third man, still at liberty, carries a cut in the arm. Gabriel Johnson suffered the most severe injury. He received 3 bad cuts, and the chances are about equal for his recovery. A slash made under the collarbone entered the lung, another wound was inflicted over the shoulder blade, and a third cut was made on the back of the arm. Matt Antilla was cut severely in front of the thigh, presumably with the same knife that opened Johnson's neck. Andrew Antilla suffered a cut in the arm. The trouble occurred in Sam Antilla's boarding house. There were 7 or 8 men, 2 women, and 2 babies in the room when the difficulty started. It is presumed that the men had been drinking heavily and got into a row. Suddenly the lights were put out and the cutting began. There is no telling who used the knife, but it is charged by Johnson that he was cut by Matt Antilla. If this is the case, the probabilities are that the wound in Antilla's own leg was inflicted by himself. According to rumors, the babies received severe treatment, and it is miraculous that they escaped serious injury. It is stated that they were at the bottom of the heap when the scrimmage ended. What part the women took in the affair cannot be learned, but no wounds were inflicted beyond those stated. There are 5 of the Antilla brothers, and it is claimed that they were all in the house at the time of the trouble, although it is not certain that the 5 were present in the room. Sam, who owns the boarding house, his brother Matt, who is charged by Johnson with having inflicted the wounds, and the third brother Andrew, were the only conspicuous ones in the row. Isaac Kangas is also under arrest on suspicion as an accessory. Kangas and Matt Antilla are now at the county jail. Johnson is in Joseph's Hospital, Hancock. Andrew Antilla has not been seen since his wounds were dressed. The wounds of Johnson and the Antillas were cared for by Dr. Moss. Sheriff Wills was notified early yesterday morning, and Under Sheriff August Beck went to the mine to bring the men to Houghton. Antilla was at Boston Station when Mr. Beck arrived, while Johnson was found at the house. The scene in the room where the stabbing occurred was a dreadful one. Pools of blood were on the floor as in a slaughter pen, and the furniture was in a dilapidated condition. Death has ended Johnson's pain. With dying breath, he accused Matt Antilla of using the knife which killed him. Daily Mining Gazette, Saturday, November 23rd, 1901, page 5. Israel Johnson The victim of the stabbing affray, which occurred last Saturday night at the Franklin Jr. in Sam Antilla's boarding house, died yesterday morning at 7 o'clock at St. Joseph's Hospital, where he had been since Monday morning. The man suffered untold agony, his cries being heard on the street before he died. The cut which he received over the left lung and near the collarbone is the one which proved fatal, the knife having entered the lung. His chances for recovery were considered about even at the outset, as he was only 19 years old, while he did not drink much and had a strong constitution. Had it not been for these facts, he could not have held out against death so long. Thursday night, when told that the chances for his recovery were very doubtful, Justice Brand of Houghton came over and took the young man's ante-mortem statement. When giving his statement, his face showed the great pain he suffered from the exertion of talking. The affray took place in a room in which there were 2 women and 2 small babies, who, when the scrimmage was over, were found underneath, and it is a miracle that none of them were seriously hurt. As it was, the babies were badly bruised. There were 5 brothers, all of whom were in the house at the time of the fracas. Sam Antilla, who owns the boarding house, Matt, whom Johnson claims did the stabbing, and his brother Andrew are the ones upon whom suspicion falls the heaviest. Isaac Kangas is also under arrest as an accessory. Andrew Antilla has not been seen since his wounds were dressed, and it is thought that he got out of the way while he could. The following is the ante-mortem statement taken from Israel Johnson before Justice Brand at 8:15 o'clock on Thursday evening. Question: Are you in fear of death, and do you wish to make a dying statement in case of death? Answer: Yes, I do. Do you know the man that stabbed you? Yes, I know the man that stabbed me. What is his name? Matt Antilla. Is there anything else you wish to say regarding how the thing happened? It is so hard for me to talk. 4 brothers of Matt Antilla were there when the stabbing occurred. Do you know the names of these brothers? Isaac Antilla, Nestor Antilla, Andrew Antilla, and Samuel Antilla. How do you know that it was Matt Antilla that stabbed you? There was some strange man that came in then and pulled me off the bed, and Matt started to hit me with the knife and stab me. I only saw this man that pulled me off one time before. I do not know his name. At the time you were stabbed, was there sufficient light to see the man that stabbed you? Yes, I could see. There was enough light to see Matt. This finished his testimony. The 3 brothers were present. In all probability, Matt Antilla will be tried for murder as soon as he can be arraigned. Murdered man's last words heard. Johnson declared he was stabbed by Matt Lantilla, who has been held for trial. Daily Mining Gazette, Thursday, December 12, 1901, page 5. The dying words of Gabriel Johnson, who was murdered at his home at Franklin, will doubtless send Matt Lantilla to prison. His last words, as he lay in the bedroom on the night of November 17th, were addressed to Edward Lantilla, and were as follows: Your brother Matt has stabbed me. I am dying. In a few moments after these words were uttered, he fell into a slumber from which he never awoke. Examination of Matt Lantilla was held yesterday before Judge Brand, and sufficient evidence was introduced to hold him for trial at the January term of the Circuit Court. There were 10 or more witnesses examined, and most damaging testimony was introduced. During the trying ordeal, Lantilla sat in a chair in front of the judge, listening to the words which came from the lips of the witnesses. He was nervous and apparently moved at times by remorse. Prosecuting attorney Larson asked him several questions, but he would not look up or give any satisfactory answer. There were none of his friends in the courtroom, no one to plead his case, and he sat there a wretched individual. This case has excited considerable interest on account of the prominence of the murdered man and his family. The murder was one of the most dastardly in the history of the county. On the evening of November 17th, Johnson's home was visited by 2 of his brothers, the 2 Lantillas, and several others. Some beer was purchased, and the men became intoxicated. Johnson, the murdered man, was not exactly satisfied with the conduct of some of his visitors, and went to his bedroom and laid down. It was several minutes before he was missed, and then the guests filed into the room and dragged him out, inquiring why he was not sociable. From that moment dated the trouble. The men went into the kitchen and became involved in an altercation. Blows resulted. Johnson was standing in one room when a hand reached around a partition and struck him several blows. In this hand was a knife. Johnson was stabbed in 3 places, in the shoulder, the back, and side. He ran out of the house and fell exhausted from the loss of blood on the snow, face downward. Edward Antilla and the Johnson brothers ran to his assistance. He was carried into the house and laid on the bed. It was then that he explained that he was standing in one room and was stabbed by a person standing on the other side of the partition. He beckoned for Edward Antilla to come to him. Antilla did so and was told that his brother had murdered him. There was a lamp in the bedroom, but it was extinguished when the scuffle began. Pandemonium reigned in the house. Johnson died several moments after the tragedy, one of the thrusts having gone to his heart. He was buried on November 19th. The weapon used was a jackknife, which was very dull. Antilla murder case now on trial. Man who is claimed to have stabbed Gabriel Johnson at Franklin is before bar of justice today. Daily Mining Gazette, Thursday, January 23rd, 1902, page 8. The trial of Matty Antilla on the charge of murder is now in progress in the circuit court, and the case will go to the jury this afternoon. The jury was impaneled yesterday afternoon, and this morning the case for the prosecution will close. Attorney Brady has been appointed by the court to conduct the defense. It is alleged that on the 17th of November, Antilla stabbed Gabriel Johnson of Franklin with a dagger in the neck, from which injuries he died 5 days later. Johnson, with some friends, was in a saloon when Antilla came in. In a few moments, they were involved in an altercation. A scuffle resulted in which Johnson was stabbed. Guilty of murder in second degree. Jury, after a half-hour's deliberation, finds that Matt Antilla stabbed Gabriel Johnson in jealous rage. Daily Mining Gazette, Saturday, January 25th, 1902, page 8. Matt Antilla has been found guilty of murder in the second degree. He killed Gabriel Johnson in Franklin Township on the evening of November 17th, stabbing him in the neck with a knife. The members of the jury deliberated but 35 minutes before a rap was heard on the door of their room, and it was announced that a verdict had been reached. This case has been on trial for a day. That much interest was taken in it was proven by the large attendance at court. The prominence of Johnson and the Antilla family made it all the more important. Antilla heard the verdict with head bent and had evidently been prepared for the worst. He exhibited remarkable composure all through the trial, but at the last moment he practically broke down. The court instructed the jury that in case that it found him guilty of murder, it must be in the second degree. The story of the murder has often been told. The row occurred at the Johnson house, where the three Antilla brothers were passing the evening, and jealousy is supposed to have caused the knifing. When Johnson realized that he was mortally wounded, he called in a whisper for John Antilla. He was asked who stabbed him, and he replied, "Matt stabbed me." These words were repeated to the brother and heard by several who stood around his bedside. The three words were the last uttered by the murdered man in his home. He was removed to the Hancock Hospital, where he died 5 days later. Antilla's brothers were subpoenaed for the prosecution and gave some very damaging testimony against him. Matt Antilla is about 27 years old. He had borne the best of reputations at Franklin and was known as an industrious and temperate fellow. In a moment of anger, he stabbed Johnson and will serve a long sentence in the state's prison. Attorney Brady, who was appointed by the court to defend him, made one of the best speeches to the jury in behalf of his client heard here in some time. He fought the case stubbornly. Prosecuting attorney Larson was equally devoted to the cause of the people and delivered an able address to the jury. And then later on, accounts said that Matt Antilla showed indifference when he was sentenced to 20 years in prison in Marquette, Michigan. Matt Antilla died from tuberculosis 10 years later in 1912. The correct name of the victim appears to be Gabriel Johnson, not Israel. And the correct name of the accused and his brothers is Antilla, not Lantilla. Antti is Andrew in Finnish, and Antilla means Andrew's place. The brother's father was named Antti, and when he struck out on his own and carved a new farm out of the wilderness in Finland, he proudly named that farm Antilla. And then Antilla became the family's last name. In 1901, the 5 Antilla brothers who immigrated to the United States up to the Keweenaw Peninsula in Michigan were Matt, who was 31, Antti, or Andrew, who was 28, Nestor, who was 27, Isaac, who was 25, and Samuel, who was 22. There were 4 other brothers that stayed in Finland. When they arrived in Houghton County, Michigan, Samuel purchased a boarding house, and Nestor, Isaac, Maddie, and Auntie were all boarders there. They worked at the Franklin Junior Mine in Boston location. There were no brothers named Edward or John, as were claimed in some of the news stories. Sam was married. His wife Maria was one of the 2 women that were present during the incident. The other woman was Maria's unmarried younger sister Kate, who worked as a maid in the boarding house. The 2 children present were Sam and Maria's son Toivo, who was born on January 12, 1900 in Finland, and their daughter Hannah, who was born on September 22, 1901 in Boston location, Michigan. The translated statements from Sam, Maria, Kate, Isaac, and Nestor appeared in the court documents, and their stories all agreed with each other, and they all seem to have had nothing to do with the murder itself. Court documents and diagrams revealed that there were 2 rooms on the lower floor of the boarding house. The men were all drinking in the kitchen/living room, and the women and children were in the bedroom. Gabriel Johnson probably did not live at the boarding house, but came there to join the party and to see Kate, whom he was interested in. At some point, he got tired of drinking with the men and went into the bedroom to visit with Maria and Kate. After a little while, some of the men went to retrieve him, and that's when the fight broke out. After the trial, Nestor returned to Finland. The mystery in this case, though, is what happened to Isaac, age 25, and Andrew, age 28. Isaac disappeared sometime after giving his deposition for his brother's trial. We don't know if he decided to go back to Finland or if he stayed in the States, but none of the family in either Finland or the United States ever heard from him again, and the same goes for Andrew Antilla, who was last seen catching that last train off the Keweenaw Peninsula. The son of Hannah, who was the 2-month-old baby at the time of the stabbing, is now a man in his 70s, and he is interested in finding his lost relatives. So if your family history has a story that matches this one, please contact me, and I will put you in touch with him. Thank you for watching Another Day in the Car with Jules.